Yeah, I was in Scotland for 2 weeks. Uh, 2 weeks. Yes, 2 weeks of madness. The mad Scottish culture. I was very happy to be back in Slovakia. Yeah, yeah, yeah. because because it's true. Because it's true. I was happy to be back in Slovakia. I have a lot of things that I want to do, and I need to be here to do them. Oh, being in Scotland is completely stopping me from my activities. Yeah, yeah. It's not the right place or the right environment for me to focus on the things that I need to do. People forget how much the environment, the things around us, affect everything that happens to us. People forget. And sociologists and psychologists learned a long time ago that you can't control people directly because they rebel, they refuse, they react. There are revolutions against things like that. So the greatest way to control people is to control their environment, because people are controlled by their environment, which is powerful because you can control your environment as well. And some environments are productive environments. Things can grow, things can flourish. If you think of people as flowers, for example, yeah, you have the right environment for the flower, the right amount of water, good earth, the right amount of sunlight, and the flower grows. But if the environment is not good, then right, the flower dies. And it's the same for people. It's the same for all living organisms. In the right environment, we all flourish and are successful. And in the wrong environment, we get frustrated and annoyed, and uh, we don't progress in the way that we should. And we all need our own space, which is why it's difficult for young people, especially living with parents sometimes, or with other living with brothers and sisters as well sometimes. That it was a great progress in society when the cultural engineers created the modern home. It didn't just happen. It was engineered. It was designed. And in the design, children got their own room. Yeah, there's a little bit too much social engineering when you need to make laws to say girls over here and boys over here, because it's something which hopefully intelligent people can decide for themselves. um, so yeah, because it makes sense for boys to have one room and girls to have another, because of all the growing problems that people have. So if you think about it, for maybe thousands of years, young people never had their own spaces. Most families slept in one room. It was the bedroom, the sleeping room, and they all sort of slept around in there, sometimes all together in one big bed. And when children got their own room, they got their own space, their own place, and for their own ideas, and their own, eventually their own walls for their own posters, and now their personal computers, or whatever else interests them. And this is really, really, really important, because your own ideas and yourself can only grow in your own space. Um, a tree gets lost in the forest. because there are lots of trees, and why should one be any different from any other? But if a tree stands alone, it looks unique and special. And so having your own room is a way of being unique and special. So the point is that if you don't have your own space, if you visit, for example, you go to visit somebody else, it's their place, it's their space, it's their flat, it's their house, you can't really do much there because it's their space, it's organized in their way. But if you're able to control your own environment a little bit, then you can have a positive effect on things. Now there's a psychological development as well that happens, which most people don't realize until they're much older. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people who are around the age of 40 or 50, that they wonder why they always have exactly the same relationship with their parents and it's never progressed. And the reason is that when you enter the environment of your parents, you instantly go back to a sort of default setting in your brain where you're the child and they're the adult. And it doesn't matter where you are or when you are, this always happens. And so it's very confusing and frustrating because we know that, for example, I know that I'm an adult. Hopefully. I'm an adult. I have responsibilities, I have a family, I run a business. So what's the point? The point is that when I go to visit my parents, I can't work constructively in that environment because I'm always fighting the mental state of parents and children when I'm there. I have to live by their rules. I have to sit at their table. I have to use their cups and their spoons and their plates. I have to ask their permission to use things. And that is not a very constructive environment. Also, there are these crazy things that make big differences. Both my parents worked for the government their whole life. And when you work for the government your whole life, it's a pretty secure job. The government is always going to be there, right? Political parties will change, but the government will always be there. And so the positive side is you can focus on your work and you don't have to worry about anything else. And the negative side is you can focus on your work and you don't have to worry about anything else. It's both positive and negative at the same time. And so the positive side is that my parents were able to do the same job for about 40 years and have a relatively stable life. The negative side is they understand nothing about running a business or being an entrepreneur or being creative or being in the marketplace, marketing, selling ideas and things to people. Because government is very much, you are a system where you're trained to do something and then you do it and that's it. There might be a little bit more training as you go through your career, but it's very limited. And you basically do one job. Like my mother was a teacher of physical education for 40 years. It's like the same job for 40 years, which is just a little bit crazy. And my yeah, exactly. Great point. Where is the growth? Where do you go? If you run your own business, you can change the direction of the business. You can try to make more money. You can experiment, but you can't do any of those things. And so, if the job doesn't grow, if the company doesn't grow, then you don't grow. And it's very habits are very dangerous because the more you do the same thing, the less you do something different. And this is kind of like insanity or madness. Like doing almost the same thing every day for a long period of time. It trains you to think in a certain way, and the more you think like this, the less you think like that. So the more you think in a fixed way, the less you think in a creative and constructive way. And you just slowly begin to not think. It becomes very, very easy to live in that way. You wake up in the morning, you turn on the radio, you get the news from the government. You eat your breakfast that you bought in a supermarket that was regulated by the government. You take your bus to work, or maybe you drive a car. But let's say you take a bus to work, which is regulated by the local government. You do your job, which is in a building constructed by the local government, in a system run by the local government, or maybe a national. You have your entertainment, which is some form of art with culture and maybe a bit of propaganda thrown in. Once again, regulated by the local government, where all the people have been trained in government schools. Um, it's a perfect world. It's a perfect world. But the result is you stop thinking, and it is very comfortable. And as I pointed out, government creates as many problems as it solves, because government creates this passive, happy lifestyle. Well, maybe semi-passive, semi-happy. And then government realizes there's a problem, because if you want progress and you want to go forward, you have to change society or change people's habits. But these habits were formed and developed over 20, 30, 40 years. How do you change it? Can you change it? And governments spend a lot of money on studying how do we change people's habits. What do we do? And it's a big problem. And there are huge government studies on people's daily habits and how much energy people use, and transportation, how much people need to move around, and on influencing and controlling the direction of society and ideas, and making people feel comfortable with things, and what language is useful and suitable and good, and on and on and on. And so, in that kind of environment, it's really hard to be creative and constructive and to do things that no one else is doing when you're in an environment where everybody's doing the same thing that everyone else is doing. My whole philosophy is to do things differently, in the hope that by doing things differently, they will be a little bit better. And the philosophy of my parents is not to do anything in any way against the system. The system has provided a lot of things for them, and their job is to serve the system. To watch the TV programs that the government says they should watch, to read the magazines the government says they should read, to eat the food the government says they should eat, to listen to what their doctor says, and take exactly, yeah. Take the medicine that the government says is the good medicine, and follow the healthcare system, and when there's something bad or something wrong, to say a few words to complain or protest about it, and then forget about it, as if nothing ever happened. And so this is the price of a peaceful life, is the price of living like that. And my choice is to live differently from them. And so when I'm in their world, it's really difficult to be creative and constructive. So I had a lot of problems fitting into that kind of environment there, where everything is one way, and my philosophy is to try to make things, or to try to do things better. There's all these little things that don't make. Like, my parents have this big old house, and they get money from the government to take out the coal fires and to put in electric fires. Now, electric fires are expensive to run, and they provide almost no heat, whereas coal fires are relatively not expensive and they provide a lot of heat. So my parents changed the systems in their house, and they have this big old house, and now the house is cold. And eventually this will lead to the destruction of the house. The house will fall apart because the heat from the coal was needed not just in one area but in the whole house to dry the stones, and the way that the old house was built, it was designed like that. The system that they have will not work. So it's a different way of living. Like, I'm vegetarian, and like, this is really confusing for my parents, because my parents just like every meal is meat. Yeah. So they don't understand this concept.
It's hard to understand for all the people.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It is, and we all reject change. Well, say almost all of us reject change or find change very difficult. I was thinking about when the big shopping center was built in Bistrica. I thought, oh, this is not a good idea, and I now know that I was completely wrong, and it was stupid to think that it was not a good idea, because I think it improved the quality of life and business for a lot of people here, and brought new and interesting things.
Yeah. Social life.
Yeah, yeah. Even if it does function like a big church where people worship shopping, on, but that doesn't matter. It was something new, and I thought, oh, it's bad, and I was completely wrong. It wasn't bad at all. It was just this. Um, there's a name for it actually. It's called ANT, automatic negative thoughts. Sometimes they're called ants with an S, ANTS, ants, automatic negative thoughts, where there's no logic really in the thought. It's just an
Prediction.
yeah. It could be like that, um, where people see everything as negative, but it's not really that way. And it is hard for the older generation to understand um, how the younger generation is thinking. Um, like my father and computers, like my father just does not understand. He does not understand computers, can't use a computer at all. Um, I remember my students using Snapchat 2 or 3 years ago, and they were all using it. And I was thinking, I don't understand why anybody would use that. But now I get it. Now I was, because young people are always the first to get it. Young people are always the first to, oh, this we can do something with this. We can use this because they're thinking creatively. They're thinking constructively. There's no limits to their imagination. And older people are just fixed, and it's like talking to a rock or something. you know, nothing changes, nothing moves. Um, Now I understand that young people wanted to, and still want to, share a little bit of information quickly with other people and not waste too much time. And that's the way that Snapchat works.
Yeah, not having their prep for like permanently or
Yeah, because there's a fear that you might regret tomorrow what you did today, as so many people do. Um, and s- and and so it had all the elements of fun and a game and teasing people and being short and then not having to think too much about it, and all those elements together. And now I understand why it worked, why it was so popular. And yeah, older people don't get it. They don't see the I guess the benefits or advantages that that young people get from things, especially with technology and advantages that brings. You got a lot of people were against digital books, and now people are very happy to use them because you can have more books in one place, and you can read your book, and you can check your emails on the same application, and take pictures with it, and write notes, and record audio and video. You can do so much. Um, it's a way of keeping more things in one place. It's practical. It's useful. It's productive. I remember people talking about when email first started. Most people couldn't understand it. Most people couldn't understand the concept of email. Like, you write a message, and then you send it to some address, and this address is somewhere online, and somebody else picks up the message. It's perfectly logical and sensible for us now, but 20 years ago, when you talked about email to somebody, they thought you were mad. They thought you were completely crazy. They were like, yeah, it's just so normal for us now that, and I understand that. I mean, what was important for me was when I left Britain. Well, when I lived in Britain, I didn't have a computer. I didn't have any digital and anything digital at all. And when I left Britain to move to Slovakia, somebody said, "Oh, you will need an email address." I was like, "An email address? Why would I need an email address?" "Oh, so you can go to an internet cafe and you can type a message to someone." Okay, well, how do I do that? You don't know? I said, no idea. So can you help me set up an email address? So my friend helped me set up an email address. And now it's crazy. Now I have 3 computers and 2 phones and a tablet, and and I use all of them all the time to run my business. And it's a great advantage for a small business because it was only big businesses in the past that could collect all the data and information and do everything. Now, small businesses can go on Facebook and create advertisements and do marketing for themselves.